This is the Living in Havering podcast.
Hello, I'm Ben Vaughan and a warm welcome to the Living in Havering podcast. Now, this is our monthly deep dive into life in Havering, where we meet residents, businesses and partners about the big issues affecting the borough. Coming up, we'll be talking community cohesion and looking at the work taking place to keep Havering a calm and friendly place to live. And as always, we'll be putting your questions to Cllr Ray Morgon in our exclusive monthly Leaders Question Time. But first, if you've been paying attention to the news in the last few years, the term housing crisis will be familiar to you. Councils up and down the country have been seeing massive increases in the demand for social housing, and the rising cost of living has pushed countless families into poverty and homelessness, putting even more strain on councils to provide costly temporary accommodation. Living's Will Taylor has been looking into some of the work underway to tackle the housing crisis here in Havering.
This is the Living in Havering podcast.
I'm here at the Waterloo and Queen Street regeneration site in Romford with VJ from Waits Residential, the council's joint venture partner, to watch the council install the first of its brand new temporary modular homes. High quality modern units designed to offer families a stable and dignified place to live.
We are on the Waterloo and Queen Street site for the delivery of the first modular homes that are due to arrive. So this is the first of 18 homes that have been built in a factory and they're being installed today.
How many temporary homes are being installed as part of this project?
So we have a total of 18 homes. They're all lateral units, so they're all units on one floor, or majority of them are single story, but we have a couple of double story units, as in the flats are masonettes on the first floor.
And why temporary homes? What's the benefit of using temporary homes over permanent buildings?
So everyone has land and demand in order to meet the housing crisis, but what we don't have is the time, because there are a lot of families in temporary accommodation, and what we're trying to do is deliver homes fast. So this allows us to have factory homes built and delivered to site as quickly as we can.
And how long will these be in place?
These are intended to be in place until the site is ready to be built with its permanent block, potentially in 5-10 years' time. But until then, these homes can be used for housing families, and eventually they can be relocated to another site where they can be utilised again.
This is part of the wider regeneration project between the council and Waits. What can you tell us about the project?
So the wider regeneration project is on its way now. We have blocks 9 and 10, so two of the blocks on the master plan that are due to get planning consent tomorrow on February 26th, and that will allow us to start on site on the first 107 homes. We've got a lot more homes to build thereafter, but what we finally have is momentum on this regeneration project.
Darren Alexander is the council's Assistant Director of Housing Demand, and it's his job to oversee the council's use of temporary accommodation. He joins us now on the Living in Havering podcast to discuss his role and the wider issues around homelessness and temporary accommodation in the borough.
So I would say at this particular point in time, the biggest pressures are we have family and friend evictions. That's the number one reason why we see homeless approaches to Havering. Behind that is the landlord's evictions, and then we have domestic abuse. So those are the three biggest pressures. In terms of numbers of emergency provision that we provide, whether it's hotels or nightly charged accommodation, that's near the 350 mark at the moment. For those types of accommodation, we pay, thereabouts £86 to £87 per night for each household.
That's quite a significant expenditure. How long are people generally in these kinds of accommodations?
So now that number and length of time is growing. So our first indicator, especially with hotels, was, and this was about a year or so ago, we had, I think it was about 72 households in hotels with children, and those households had been in accommodation for over 6 weeks. We did around September last year get that down to 0, but that number's creeped up again, and I think it's thereabouts around 30 households over 6 weeks. And then as we transitioned households from hotels to nightly paid accommodation, our first tranche of households who've come in and been the first recipients of that provision, they're probably still there now. So we're looking at probably a year to 18 months. So that's the length of time that families could likely stay in these units before they see any more move on.
What's the plan regarding move on? How does that work? How do you transition someone from a temporary accommodation to a permanent one?
Yeah, so and that's the difficulty. So I'll give you a bit of a journey for people, which would likely happen. So if you come through the front door, make a homeless application, the first point of call or place that we would look to make a placement is a hostel accommodation. So that's where you could get immediate support on site from our hostel officers. If that availability is not there, then we would look to the private rented market, and it would probably be the first point of call for hotel accommodation. And in the event that that fails, we would look to a nightly paid property. So this will look like a private rented property. It will feel like a private rented property, but it is not a private rented property. It is effectively a booking that we can open and close on the day. So it's really short term. And then once you're in either one of those provisions, we will then try to make a second move to a more stable position. So for instance, if you're in a hotel, you can move from a hotel to a hostel accommodation, and then the longer term move for that household would be into a private sector lease property. And this is a lease arrangement with a landlord in the private rented market, but where we have almost exclusive rights to those properties for the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And that's how long households can stay in there while they wait for a permanent accommodation. And when I say permanent, our council stock isn't actually a lifetime tenancy. It's a 5-year fixed term tenancy. Another part of it is that we are going to have to do some office to resi conversions into private rented sector accommodation, and then we will have access to that for another 10 years. And then the final element is that we'd look to build to rent new private rented properties for the open market. And we're hoping that that provision could be really longer term, and that's up to 40 years. So a household, once they get accommodation, they can be there for as long as 40 years, and that gives a bit more stability to their families.
So it sounds like there's lots of things in the pipeline to kind of help with this issue over the longer term.
Yeah, so the pipeline's been really important for us at Havering, because if we don't address the pipelines now, because it takes a long time for the pipeline to actually feed through into the system. I think for Havering, we're in a slightly better position because we've been working on this pipeline of accommodation for a number of years. So we hope to exit out of nightly paid accommodation by 28, 29. The challenge for us will be sustaining that position, because the numbers on waiting lists are growing, which tells us that people are really struggling to stay where they've grown up. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is meeting people's aspirations about what does housing look like for me when I've grown up, lived here my entire life, and hope to do so for many generations.
So part of this episode, we visited the installation of the first modular homes at the Waterloo and Queen Street site. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Modular brings us and gives us a different opportunity to provide high quality accommodation, because modular is probably the most energy efficient units that are coming into the system, but also that it could be brought in straight from a production line. Now, what I like about that is that because there's some difficulty for local authorities to actually go out, provide their own money and build themselves, modular is just a slightly different financial model that is accessible, it's scalable, and it's good quality, aesthetically in line with placemaking and the landscape as well. So when we had the demo in the town centre, Romford, just outside the Icelands, the feedback for that scheme was fantastic. We identified a site on the Waterloo estate that was available for us to consider a meanwhile use, which effectively means that while the rest of the development is being designed, planning, and then being developed, there's still going to be a bit of land that probably wouldn't be touched for a number of years. So I asked the architects to come in and meet families in one of our hostels to talk about actually what is the need and what are they finding is missing. They fed that back, and then that was built into the design of the scheme itself. So it was really led by families who are experiencing homelessness at the moment.
I like that. So it kind of had the input from the people that are going to be living there.
Yeah, and we've already matched some of those people that were part of that design process to go in and live there as well. So, and they will be seeing it in the next few weeks being delivered and craned in.
And as you say, it saves money in the long term as well for the nightly costs that you'd be paying otherwise.
Yeah, it's such a great model, and I hope that we can continue to do some more of them, because outside of the planning aspect and the time it takes to get through planning, etc., those units can be delivered in a number of days.
So just lastly, you get a lot of misconceptions about temporary accommodation and how the system works. I imagine you hear a lot of that. If there was one thing you wish that residents sort of understood about the complexity and the scale of temporary accommodation and the challenges you face, what would that be?
Well, first of all, that we are talking about ordinary people, households, workers, whether they're teachers, whether they're nurses, are experiencing homelessness. And, homelessness is happening to everyone now, with London being where it is, with the financial climate, the cost of living, landlords being challenged from a legislative perspective, from a tax perspective, from an interest rate perspective. So it's a really difficult time for people locally to be able to continue to afford to live in London. And when they're in trouble, they're going to come to us for support. So that scale has been building over time. But now we're starting to see that it's going to be unsustainable.
Thank you, Darren, for speaking to us today.
Yeah, no worries at all.
The Living in Havering podcast is just one way you can keep up to date with what's happening around your borough. Sign up for the Living in Havering email newsletter, the council's weekly publication, bringing you all of the latest news, events and important updates from across Havering. It's completely free and takes less than a minute to subscribe. Visit havering.gov.uk/e-news. That's havering.gov.uk/e-news and sign up today.
You're listening to the Living in Havering podcast. Now, in the past few episodes of this podcast, a number of people have sent questions into the leader, raising concerns about heightened tensions with race relations and community tensions closer to home. With that in mind, we're now joined by Havering Council's Community Cohesion Manager, Jess Finnin, to lay out the lay of the land in Havering and what the council's doing to ensure we can all live in a calm and peaceful borough. Hello, Jess.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us here on the Living in Havering podcast. You specialise in community cohesion, so I imagine in the current climate, you're fairly busy.
It's a little bit hectic, to say the least, yes.
Yeah, I thought that would be the case. So first question for you, Jess. What do we mean by community cohesion?
So it can mean many things to many people. For my purposes and for our purposes, basically we want to create the conditions, if that makes sense, for our communities from wherever they come from, different backgrounds, identities, ages and experiences. We basically need them and want to help them feel connected, safe and valued, and also that they're able to participate in their communities. People that are unable to participate in communities have much harder time when it comes to health and well-being, loneliness and isolation. So anything we can do to get people living and working together in a way that works for everybody.
Okay, so in Havering, we hear a lot about the changing demographic of the borough, the changing population. With that in mind, what are the biggest challenges we face in Havering at the moment?
So there's an awful lot of challenges that are facing Havering at the minute, and it all sort of plays into when it comes to community cohesion and how these things all sort of nudge along together. So the financial pressures and reliance on council tax means that we really struggle when it comes to helping people feel like putting into the community, they get out what they put in. People's only real engagement with us as a council is around potholes, bin collections and things like that. So when we're talking about living in a safe and lovely and happy borough, that can really make people feel like they're not getting their value for money, which means everybody wants more when there's less resource to go around, which really puts strains on community. We've also got some real pockets of socioeconomic inequality in the borough, where that disadvantage sort of exists, means that there's a higher vulnerability for our communities, sort of lower community resilience. We've also consistently had some of the highest number of extreme right-wing referrals to the Prevent programme in London. So again, we're dealing with a slightly different kind of cohesion problem there.
You mentioned the police and Prevent. What exactly is Prevent for people that don't know?
So Prevent is part of the government's counter-terrorism strategy, which is also known as Contest. That breaks down into 4 areas. So one of them is Prevent, but Prevent in all of that is about preventing individuals from becoming radicalised or from becoming involved in acts of terror. We are dealing with a lot more cases than we ever have done before.
And I understand that you, in your role as well, you also do quite a lot on social media in a sense of monitoring the tensions there and community behaviour.
Yeah, we do. And important to note, we're not spying on people when it comes to that. It's listening. And it's really important that we are able to respond when the community comes to us with questions, particularly when there's a lot of misinformation around things that happen. Some of that's malicious, but an awful lot of it is someone's heard from somebody who's heard from somebody who's heard from somebody. And as we know, the more people a rumour goes through, the less accurate it is. So again, making sure that we're there as that misinformation sort of comes to light and that we're able to provide the correct information.
Okay, all right. Well, now Havering recently held its first Cohesion Summit with faith leaders. Marcus Chrysostomou, our executive producer here on the Living in Havering podcast, attended the event and spoke to several of the attendees.
In February, Havering Council held its first Cohesion Summit, bringing together faith leaders and community champions to explore what we can all do to keep Havering a safe and pleasant place for its residents. I spoke to some of the attendees about why they're at the event and heard from speakers about the work they're already doing to bring communities together.
I'm Deacon Sarah Jane Rigby. I'm with the Romford Methodist Circuit. I'm hoping to hear from lots of different faiths and just how perhaps we can be more in community together. Can live in our little pockets sometimes, but some of the groups I work with, I do a lot of work with mums and toddlers. We have Hindus, we have Sikhs, we have Christians, we have non-Christians.
Michael Levy. I represent Romford District Synagogue. So let me put it this way, the more people talk, the better off we are. And we really need to talk, not only between groups, but between religions. And that's my biggest concern. People from different religions understand each other and their different points of view.
My name's Charlie Routley. I'm the Acting Chief Inspector for Havering Safe Neighbour Team. So I'm talking about the Cllr Build project and how it's a cohesive framework for problem solving within the community. And that brings the police, the partners and the community together to tackle systemic problems. The whole point of it is working together, bringing people in to help solve problems, because not everything can be done through enforcement. So a lot of it is community problems and social economic problems, and it's bringing everyone together to solve those underlying issues.
So I'm here with Ray Morgan, the leader of the council. What's the main theme of tonight?
Well, the main thing is that we want Havering to maintain its calm and cohesive nature, and working with all the different faith groups and communities is one way of doing that.
Marcus Chrysostomou there, reporting from our first Cohesion Summit. So, as we said, Jess, you were at the event. Was it successful? And do you think there'll be more?
It was a brilliant event. We had sort of 65 people there from various walks of life, various interests, and it was fantastic. It was really well attended and people really got engaged. The Interfaith Forum and attendees also brought along food and things like that. So it was a really lovely experience to sort of share different cultures, different food. And it was great to see how much work is going on in the borough that we're not necessarily involved with as the council. So hearing from the voluntary community sector with the volunteer centre talking about the amazing work they do and how volunteering can improve community resilience but also get people talking to people that they wouldn't normally talk to. We heard about unconscious bias and the role that plays in our interactions and how we work as communities. So we're hoping to do one sort of every 6 months because there is so much more going on out there.
One question for you then, someone listening, how does something like that go to help the long-term cohesion and peacefulness of the borough?
So I think it's making sure that those small conversations build into something bigger. After all of this, we want people to be able to build trust between communities. We want to reduce misconceptions about different communities and to strengthen your sense of belonging in living in Havering. We want to increase people's ability to connect with each other, to feel kindness and to feel empathy, and to make us all feel safer and welcome.
And we've spoken a lot about the tensions in the community, but there is a lot of love there too, isn't there?
There is an awful lot of love out there, and getting out there and talking to people about the things they love doing is fantastic. We've got a bunch of projects going on across the borough designed for people to tell us their stories, to tell us what they love about where they live and to feel pride in where they live, because I think that's something we all want.
So just on that note, what is one thing that our listeners could do to help make Havering a more cohesive and perhaps kinder borough?
I think it is having a conversation and going at it without any expectation of what you think the other person's going to tell you. I've had some amazing conversations with people that I wouldn't have any reason to talk to. But it's those kinds of things. Have a chat, have a conversation, build that trust and see where you end up.
Absolutely. So the message is there. Talk to someone perhaps you wouldn't usually speak to because
you might have more in common than you think. All right, Jess, before you go, if someone does become a victim of hate crime or is concerned about tensions, what should they do?
So if you become a victim of a hate crime, please report that to the police. You can do so online at True Vision. You can also do that by dialing the emergency line if it's happening there or then, or the non-urgent police line if it's not. We can also email us at prevent@havering.gov.uk or vcs@havering.gov.uk for anything you might be concerned about within your communities or anything we can potentially do to work together to help solve that problem.
Yeah, absolutely. There is help out there. So thank you, Jess, again for your time and for joining us here on the Living in Havering podcast and for all your work helping to keep the borough a friendly and kind place to be.
Thanks, Ben.
You're listening to the Living in Havering podcast.
Now it's time for the part of the podcast where we put your questions to the leader of Havering Council, Cllr Ray Morgon, in our monthly Leaders Question Time. So Ray, welcome along.
Good morning, Benjamin.
Morning. So we've once again received lots of questions for you. Now, as always, we'll do our best to get through them all, but if we don't get to any, then of course we will also do our best to respond via email. So Ray, you ready to dive straight in?
Yeah, all good to go.
Excellent. Okay, so our first question today comes from Michael. He asks, how long do you need to live in Havering to apply for retirement housing?
Yes, you need to have lived 4 out of the last 6 years in the borough to be able to put forward your application. And my advice would be to obviously contact the appropriate team in the council to do that.
Absolutely, because of course circumstances do differ depending on individual situations.
Indeed so.
Okay, all right, nice and easy that one then. Hopefully that answers your question, Michael. On to question 2 comes from Jason. Now, this is concerning Havering's budget deficit. He's asking, is this due to fiscal responsibility on the council's part? Is it really fair that taxpayers should pay more when the council can't look after its finances and councillors and officers keep claiming their salary, pension and perks?
I have to say a little bit of a surprising question, given the fact that over the past 4 years, we have been very open, honest and transparent as to the reasons why we are in the financial difficulties that we are currently in. It's nothing to do with fiscal irresponsibility. It's purely the fact that over a decade or more, we have been underfunded by the government. Interestingly, a couple of years ago, the government actually asked that we get an independent review, and an independent organisation called Cllr carried out a review, and their conclusion was that we were generally a well-run and well-managed council. Now, one of the things I think central government should be liable for all people-based services, because they are predominantly services that we have to provide by law, and given the fact that it's the government who instigates the law, they should, in my view, be paying for those services, and place-based services should be funded locally by council taxpayers. Then residents can see precisely how and where their money is being spent, and if they are not happy with how that's being done, then obviously they have the right to hold the council to account.
Yeah, and I mean, Jason, last month in the podcast, we spoke to our strategic finance director, Kathy Freeman, who went through sort of in painstaking detail, actually, about all the work taking place behind the scenes and everything that we need to do to produce a balanced budget, which the council, of course, needs to do by law. But also, I think, Ray, the question doesn't really take into account all the lobbying efforts that's been taking place over the last 4 years as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we have been lobbying quite strongly for the past number of years. In fact, that culminated last year in a petition that we'd been asking residents of Havering to sign, which we delivered to 10 Downing Street, the very heart of government.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. Hopefully, Jason, that's answered your question. And there's a wealth of information on the council's website about the budget setting process and all of the number crunching. So we're moving on now, Ray, to question 3. And this comes from Deb. Now, she's asking, has there been a reduction in service for the Rainham area recently? It seems like there's so much litter in the streets. Potholes make the pavements and roads feel like patchwork. And also, it feels like there is a lack of trees in urban areas and we need to plant more. So quite a lot there to cover off, but essentially the main crux of the question is, have we seen a reduction in the services for Rainham?
No. All parts of the borough are treated fairly and equally. No part of the borough gets treated better than any other part of the borough. Now, in terms of litter in the streets and potholes, my suggestion would be to speak to your local ward councillors. Now, certainly the number of potholes has increased in the last number of months all over the borough because, of course, the substantial amount of rain does tend to have a negative impact in producing potholes. However, the good news has been that over the past 4 years, we have spent many millions of pounds on renewing many roads and pavements in the borough. Rather than spend a lot of money on reactive work, we're more keen to spend money in preventative work in the first place. In terms of trees, if you feel that there should be some extra trees in your road or in the particular area, again, these are the kind of things that you can raise with your local ward councillors.
Absolutely. So, Deb, if there's a specific issue that you're concerned about, you can raise it with your local ward councillor. You can, of course, also report fly tipping and potholes and so forth on the council's website. Okay, moving on to the next question. It comes from Kerry, asking what steps is the council taking to increase the number of genuinely affordable homes for local residents?
Yes, obviously, we know how important affordable homes are, and obviously we're doing our very best to increase the number through the various developments in the borough. But of course, one of the issues both us and developers have is obviously the financial viability of developments, because of course, in the last number of years in particular, the costs of development have massively increased, both from a materials point of view and a labour point of view.
Sure. And I mean, we're also doing a lot of work as well around temporary accommodation too, Ray, such as the modular homes.
Indeed,
saw
yes.
them arriving at Waterloo and Queen Street earlier.
That's a good start. And certainly going forward, I'm sure that we'll be looking to increase the number of modular homes.
Okay, there you go, Kerry. Hopefully that answers your question. Lots of work taking place. We're going to move on to community safety now. Earlier in the podcast, we spoke to Jess Finnan, our community cohesion manager, who was talking about the joint work that takes place between the council and the police on a daily basis. And understand that you attended an event in Harold Hill recently to mark the anniversary of the Clear Hold Build initiative. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I was in my place last Saturday as the police had put together an event around the Clear Hold Build initiative that's been going on for the last number of years. And certainly the good news from that event was that there was good partnership working between the local police and Havering Council within the sort of community safety and enforcement teams. In the first year of the Clear Hold Build initiative, the amount of antisocial behaviour reduced by 50%. And certainly I know that many of the shops in the Harold Hill area were subject to shoplifting, and it also included threatening behaviour towards staff in those shops, including having acid thrown over them.
And of course, Ray, Clear Hold Build is just one local initiative taking place. There's lots of other action taking place locally by the police. And to keep track of all that, residents can sign up to the Met Engage email service.
Indeed so, yes. There's lots of real positive work. And of course, the other thing is that the council, despite its financial difficulties, fund the Section 92 police officers, which do a brilliant job in the borough.
Excellent stuff. Okay, so now, Ray, we've come to the end of the questions, but you recently announced you would be stepping down as leader and retiring from the council at the end of this term. So that means that this is your last leader's question time. Let's try not to get too emotional. But with that in mind, as you hang up your hat as Captain Morgan of the good ship Havering, what will you take away as your time as leader?
Yes, I like to think that in the past 4 years being leader, I've certainly given 100% to the role. In fact, what I can say with hand on heart, that I work the best part of 7 days a week. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I actually am sort of hanging up whatever council leaders hang up, because I get very little leisure time. And not many years ago I had a stroke, and if I carried on as I do for another 4 years, who knows, I probably wouldn't make the next 4 years. But I do believe that, and certainly the feedback that I've had from a number of residents who have obviously got to know that I am not standing in May, it's been extremely positive. Many people have said, they're sad that I'm leaving, but like to thank me for all the hard work that I've done over many, many years. But I like to think, as I say, I've done a pretty decent job. I've been very clear in terms of trying to be less political and more focused on improving Havering and the life of residents in Havering. And I think I've done a pretty good job at bringing a lot of that about.
Okay, well, Ray, as you said, as much as you enjoy the job and the challenges that it brings, health has to come first. So that's perfectly understandable. Now, what do you see you will be leaving as your legacy as leader?
Well, I like to think that I've changed the sort of culture. In the previous administration, did feel that it was quite a negative culture, but I think under my leadership in the last 4 years, I do feel that I have changed the culture within the council. And I was very clear from day one that we would be a very open, honest and transparent administration. And certainly, I believe we have been.
Okay, I mean, yeah, honesty, transparency has definitely been your mantra from the beginning when you first came in, and has followed you all the way through your tenure as leader. So, Ray, lastly, as you're standing down, whatever happens in the May elections, there will definitely be a new leader of Havering Council. So do you have a message for that new leader?
Yes, I do. I'd like to think that the new leader will carry on the principles that I've adhered to over the past 4 years in terms of being open, honest and transparent with residents in the borough, even if sometimes you have to provide information that may not be what they want to hear. But it is about communicating with people in the right way. And it's also about treating everybody fairly and equally to have that calm and cohesive borough. What we do not want is any sort of internal battles between different groups.
No, of course. Okay, well, Ray, we are out of time for this month's Leaders Question Time, and actually our last Leaders Question Time. In fact, we're out of time. So, Ray, as you move on to pastures new, we wish you all the best for the future, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the last 4 years.
Yes, thank you, Benjamin, and likewise, it's been a pleasure working with you and all the communications team, who I feel have done a fantastic job in getting information and messages out there to our residents.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. We'll take that. All the best, Ray.
You're listening to the Living in Havering podcast.
Well, that's it for this episode. We'll be back in April for another look into life in Havering and the people that make it a great place to live, work and visit. So if you have a story you think others want to hear, you can get in touch by emailing living@havering.gov.uk. Remember to like and subscribe, and also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Nextdoor and WhatsApp. Also, make sure to sign up to our free weekly Living in Havering email newsletter, bringing you the latest news and events from Havering and those all-important council service changes you don't want to miss. You can subscribe on our website at havering.gov.uk/newsletters. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next month. The Living in Havering podcast was presented by Ben Vaughan. The producer was Will Taylor, and the executive producer was Marcus Chrysostomou.